Dr. Eric Naki, author and political editor at the Citizen newspaper, believes that the younger generation of political leaders could learn a thing or two from their predecessors who participated at the Convention for a Democratic South Africa. Naki says the recent coalition negotiations among political parties ahead of the formation of municipal councils was messy, leading to doubt being cast on their commitment. He joins us now for more on his thought piece article. For joining us this afternoon. So perhaps maybe let's just talk about your thought piece article. In the main, what are you arguing for?
My argument is that coming from the recent coalition negotiations among the political parties, there were negotiations across the board. The reason I say it was messy because they couldn't agree on many things. At the end of the day, some of them really ended up forcing coalitions, entering into coalitions that were without any approval of the opponents. You know, to me, the way these negotiations were conducted, it was not really proper in that people came up with their different demands. People tended to put forward the ideologies more than the talk about service delivery issues. When we come with ideologies, we will never actually be able to agree immediately. It means then whether there were agreements at the end of the day, these agreements really are messy in that they can lead to stability, instability, what I want to say, in future, because they are not set on a strong base. They are set on a weak base, where there are still differences underneath. That is my argument. My argument is that these leaders had not done a great job, unlike their predecessors who negotiated this democratic South Africa. They understood each other. They knew they come from different backgrounds. They were fighting each other in terms of militarily. There were people in the streets fighting for freedom. But they were able to come up with a constitution at the end of the day.
It is that I want to focus on, and that piqued my curiosity. So you compare, you know, the leadership and negotiation of old to today. Perhaps for the purpose of this discussion, let's look at the negotiation in terms of, you know, the transition into democracy. You say that, you know, the likes of Dr. Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, and F.W. de Klerk, Piet Botha, Kobie Coetsee, on the other hand, gave the constitutional negotiations process the seriousness it deserved. Because to them it was about the future of the country. This is what your article says. There is a widely held view in some sectors of society that says, well, that negotiation, including some of the sunset clauses, did not benefit everybody in South Africa. And there are people who are calling for perhaps, you know, a relook at it and going back to the negotiating table. Your thought to that?
My thought on that, really, I don't disagree with that. There was a lot that some people can say those leaders compromised a lot, too much at the expense of the citizens, at the expense of the people. Look today that there is still a question around land. You know, black people still don't have land, don't possess. That is a problem, because we believe that that thing could have been discussed there and finished there. But at the end of the day, that was not really what we were talking about. The real issue was democracy, you know, in South Africa, that we needed to achieve democracy. And they were able to talk to each other, despite all their differences. They had huge differences. Right from the people who came from exile, people who came from jail, and there was this government of the National Party that was really oppressing people inside the country. But they put aside their differences. Despite all those things, compromises were necessary. Like any other negotiation, there has to be compromises. It depends on how you look at those compromises. To some people, those compromises helped us to be where we are today. But because at the same time, those compromises are the causes of the problems that we have today. I agree with that notion. At the same time, compromises were necessary for that period, because it was a period where black people had to move from one place to another, the place of freedom, democracy, and constitutionalism.
Yes. You mentioned ideologies a little bit earlier on, and you're talking about compromises now, right? So a party that doesn't compromise on some of its policies, for instance, the EFF demanding that, you know, the stem be dropped from the national anthem. You propose that it cannot?
Not that I wanted the stem not to be removed there. What I'm saying there is that if you remove the stem from the national anthem, you cannot do that. The ANC could not agree to that without offending certain racial groups, the minorities, certain like Afrikaners, for instance, the African-speaking people. If you want to remove the stem, you must be aware that you will be offending that. The EFF gave the ANC, I think, 12 months to remove that, and it's a controversial topic. Anybody would like really us to have a national anthem that includes all of us together without separating this and that. But the fact is, whatever you do, if you tamper with the national anthem as it is now, it's going to cause a lot of problems for certain people. It may be a populist view from some people, but if you look at the question of nation building, which is the main argument of my column, is nation building. It looks like nation building in this country has taken a tumble. Since Nelson Mandela, who pursued that idea, there has not been any champion of that. Instead, there is a lot more polarization of races, of virtual racial groups in South Africa. Polarization is at the highest level now than just after '94.
Naki, what does then it look like to you, right? So what needs to be done where a majority of the population still live, you know, in rather precarious situations? What do you foresee happening, or how do you propose that we build this nation without upsetting, as you say, one party over another? Am I capturing you correctly?
You are capturing
I hope I'm not misrepresenting you.
Yes. You know what I'm proposing there is a national convention, which is the idea that the person that I'm writing about in this book called Bantu Holomisa, the Game Changer, is one of the things that he proposed, that South Africa needs a national convention, which is an idea that I advocate as well. The national convention is where parties come together in the similar way as CODESA, but more broader than CODESA, because this one needed to include civil society as well, because those are major players when it comes to dealing with issues that affect people. All political parties, you can have experts, we can have economists, we can have everybody who is concerned about the future, to hammer out the future with preset goals, you know, predetermined goals, to say this is what we want to achieve, where people will put aside everything else, and everybody will want to a solution to what is happening in this country. This country, there is a lot that has regressed. Things have tended to go back. Racial tension. People just go on social media and they record racist statements up and down, and you see people calling each other names across the racial lines. You see people, others calling, emphasizing white monopoly capital, as if that thing is something new. They are putting it in a different context. You know, there are a lot of people now that at schools, there are schools that are said to be racist, and people they march to those schools. They are attacked by whites. Like the EFF marched to a school in Cape Town, and they were attacked. It shows how racism is coming back in South Africa. Recently, we had issues around Phoenix, the massacre that happened there. You will never expect racial-related massacre in a democratic South Africa, but it happened because of this racial tension that is high in this country now.
Perhaps in just closing off the conversation, you know, I think generationally also we've got like a number of gaps in the country, right? So you've also got maybe the old school believing that, you know, we should have dialogue, let the process run itself out again. And there is a younger generation that feels like we are tired of the talking. You know, it's time for the acting. We cannot afford to be in the position that we are in, or for the next generation to be in that position. What do you tell this young generation that is very antsy?
Yeah, you know, much as we need action, but action there has to be dialogue. Dialogue will not stop. Dialogue has to be there all the time, even about the future. For instance, when I'm proposing a national convention like Holomisa proposed, is to discuss the future, really to review what happened at CODESA, to look at the Constitution as well, to review the Constitution to see where did it wrong, what are the weaknesses, where can we strengthen. You know, that is the kind of dialogue that I'm talking about. It doesn't mean that action. I also need action. I need the government to act to make sure things are happening in this country. But dialogue will not stop. That is the national convention that I'm talking about.
Right. Maybe just very quickly for us, that book that you have, what was the interest with Udatu Holomisa and why is he a game changer?
Bantu Holomisa was a leader of Transkei, military ruler in Transkei. He took over in a military coup, overthrew Stella Sigao. Or you can say overthrew the Matanzimas, because Stella Sigao was a lackey of the Matanzimas in I think it was 1987. Holomisa did the unthinkable, where he unbanned the ANC. He was the first in South Africa to unban the ANC, PAC, APLA. They were operating in Transkei, much to the anger of the National Party government. They didn't like it. But he unbanned them. That's game-changing. Another thing is that actually he allowed the people of Transkei free political activity, something that was not happening under Matanzima. They were able now to demonstrate, to hold meetings, to have trade unions. There were no trade unions under Matanzima. That's game-changing. Also, when the ANC was unbanned, there were some leaders that were still needed by the authorities, National Party, to arrest, such as Chris Hani and others. They actually went to Transkei to exile. And the National Party couldn't do anything because Holomisa and his military council said, you can't touch those people. You know? So Transkei became the place of exile. For many people, some came from KwaZulu-Natal, they went to exile there, such as Chief Mapumulo of Controlesa. There were people that were sent by the king, Zwelithini. They went to exile in Transkei.
In another time, this sounds like such a delicious read. We are definitely going to look at that and explore what you have written. And Gosdado Eric Naki is an author and the politics editor at the Citizen newspaper. Thank you, sir.